so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. In fact, it's a real treat because it was lovely not to have to move some of you before we began. I'd like to tell you about one of the first students I ever taught. Her name was Tracy. Now, Tracy was in year 9. I was her form teacher, 14 years old, mousy brown hair. Just like any other student, really. But there was something about her, something that I just couldn't quite place. I couldn't put my finger on it. It was as if she was like a beautiful flower, but without any colour. So I was particularly keen to draw her out of her shell. She was very withdrawn. So over time, through, gaining rapport, and we'd have a little chat, and occasionally she'd give me eye contact and say, "Morning, miss." I'd say, "Hi, Tracy, how are you doing?" And now and again we'd have a little chat. But on the whole, she'd keep herself to herself. Now, a little while into the term, she came in one day and she seemed absolutely exhausted. So I asked her, I said, "Tracy, what's up? You look shattered." And rather than just brushing me off and saying, "No, I'm fine, miss," she actually came up and shared with me. She said, "I'm really, really tired, miss." I said, "Sweetheart, why are you so tired?" I just can't sleep." "Why can't you sleep, sweetheart? Your SATs are a long way away. You're doing great." Well, then she began to share with me. Just before the school term had begun, her father had committed suicide. Now, she couldn't sleep. She couldn't get the image of her dad out of her head. She couldn't get the image of her dad hanging out of her head. Now, there was no manual for this. I wasn't prepared for this. I had no resources to deal with this. I was a fool. I was a fool to imagine that just because I had a beautiful certificate framed on my wall, that I was qualified to teach this young girl. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Now, this is not to say that I did not love my first year of teaching. In fact, I was like that classic NQT. I was buzzing around, bouncing off the walls, joining every club, and if there wasn't a club, I'd start one. I'd really enjoy setting new challenges for the girls. I loved teaching. I was thrilled to be there. In fact, I was so proud that finally I was making a difference. I was doing what I loved, loving what I was doing. And I felt that the girls were enjoying my company, being inspired. And I remember that day when, a few months into the term, I rang my mum and said, "Mum, this is it. I found it. I found what I'm meant to do. I'm making a difference. I'm building their self-esteem. Their confidence is growing. I feel great in the classroom and I love my subject." Have you ever had that? And you have that moment in time and you think, this is it. I'd come home. I was absolutely thrilled to be a teacher. I was loving every moment of it. My heart was singing. My mind was dancing. I always had so many ideas. But of course, this meant I was a little bit out of balance. I was so elated all the time and enthusiastic all the time, and I was working the crazy hours and I was making sure that I was getting everything done. It meant that even though my heart and mind were very satisfied, my body was struggling. And I have a belief that the body never lies. So, the relentless marking and prep, the never-ending meetings and paperwork, the report writing and the unceasing need to do the little extra things that needed to get done every day. I was working hugely long hours, and I was really happy to. Don't get me wrong, I was really happy to. Unfortunately, my body just couldn't handle not only the physical demands of the teaching job. I never sat down. I had to rush and actually book in times to go to the toilet. My body wasn't happy with me. Now, by the end of my first term, I was still happy, but I was really shattered. By the end of my first year, I was so sick, I was hospitalised. I underwent major surgery, and that beautiful summer holiday that I had been focused on when I was thinking, yes, when we get that summer break, I will be able to just relax, catch my breath, gather myself. It was wasted. I didn't see that summer. And I also missed the next half term of teaching. It took a long time to recover. So, I needed to do things differently. I needed to learn a new way if I wanted to stay in the job that I really loved. I had no resources. I had no one to show me how to cope. So I thought, well, I need to find out a way. And this is what I really want to share with you today. So stepping back a moment and just letting your imagination have some fun. I'd like you to imagine a creature. Now this creature is a wild creature. This creature has so much energy, it's bursting out of itself. This creature is getting so frenetic that it actually doesn't know what to say first and it doesn't really know where to go. This creature is just a little bit crazy, and just add in some erratic, aggressive behaviour now and again, and a sprinkling of depression and maybe a few tears, and you've got it. That is me at the end of a school day. Now, times that by tenfold, and you've met my head of department. But seriously, I do believe we almost modelled some of the behaviours that we were encountering in the classroom. I'd like to introduce you to Jack. Jack was a sweet boy. I just adored him. He was a little bit puny, blonde, very short for his age. Now, he was a wild boy. He would dash into my classroom and say, what are you going to do today? It's like, hi, Jack, well, come in. Come and sit down. Now, this boy was a delight, and he was a nightmare to try and teach. He had all the labels you can possibly imagine. He had ADHD, he was on the BSN register and the SEN register, and you name it, he owned it. Add to the mix that he had a little sensitivity to sugar, shall we say? And his mum would also like to dabble with his Ritalin, which was the medication that was hopefully going to help him calm down and get balanced. So we had this nice cocktail of stuff going on inside him, and you can imagine that his sensitivity to sugar, junk food, food colourings was always a delight when you taught him after lunch. And guess when I got to teach him? You guessed it. So Jack would bubble in and he'd say, hi miss, what are we going to do today? Come on in. Shall we do clay? Jack, come in, sit down. See if you can sit down. Sit down, sweetheart. Yes, I'm going to take the register. No, sit down, sweet. Jack, come and sit on your seat. You know what it's like. I had a vow to myself quietly inside that by the end of the year, I was going to get through the entire name of registers while he was sitting down. I don't think I ever achieved it. I mean, he really was a challenge. Now, you may think, okay, well, she's exaggerating a little. No, I'm not exaggerating. And of course, I'd like you to imagine timesing that by 30. And then imagine the sort of emotional resilience I required to stay calm and centred and relaxed and keep my students not only in the classroom on their seats, but actually learning, in a state ready to learn some information, to experience some creativity and inspiration. Not an easy job. You say, oh, Kathryn, you might just be, blowing it out of proportion a little bit. No, I'm not. 30 different personalities, 30 different emotional needs, 30 different learning needs, all requiring my attention, my 100% attention, which I wanted to give. That was my raison d'etre, to make a difference to these kids. And you can imagine the emotional drain on the body, and actually you probably don't need to imagine that. It was hugely demanding. Now that was part of the joy of the job, absolutely. However, there needs to be a balance. There needs to be some way in which we can connect with these young people, meet their needs, but also take care of our own needs. So you have these 30 personalities and you have all of these demands. I can honestly say it was one of the biggest learning curves in my life, being in that classroom. It was just remarkable. It's quite interesting, actually. I now teach in a prison. It's quite extraordinary, in fact, that in some of the schools that I taught, I didn't feel as safe as I do in a high-security prison. I have an officer outside my door. I have an alarm bell that I can touch. 3 different places in my classroom. I didn't have that in some of my schools. And I can honestly say, I felt hugely intimidated by some of these boys. By year 10, we know some of them are towering above us. So, which would you rather choose? Murderers? Gang leaders? Or actually a bunch of year 10 boys that do not know how to say hello, do not know how to sit down, and they're just surrounding you and leaning over you. Truly, the difference in the way that they greet me. In the prison, they feel privileged to step into my classroom. They'll give me eye contact. After a while, and once they've got past that fear of actually stepping back into a classroom. Morning, miss. Good morning, come in. At school, if I was lucky, I'd get a, miss. Yes, hello. Peter, come in. At the worst case scenario, I'd get a, what are you looking at? Why are you staring at me? Are you coming into my class? What? You know that kind of energy. It's hugely intimidating to have someone in your face. Times that by 30 big year 10 boys, and I can honestly tell you, it takes a lot of personal courage. Now, luckily, by the time that I stepped into some of these very demanding schools, I had these internal resources. I had an emotional resilience that I could share with them. I had an ability to connect with them without the aggression. After all, I'm their number 1 mentor. They spend more time with me than they usually do at home by this stage. I'm an ambassador for loving acceptance, for peaceful behaviour, for clear communication. It's important that I am in a right state. Not a right state, but in the right state. It's vital that we give these children what they need, but we need to be in a fit state, fit for purpose. Now, the beginning of my teaching career, I was not fit for purpose. And I believe that even now, 15 odd years later, there's still no training, no support for new teachers, for any teachers for that matter, to build up these skills. So, what we have is the opportunity to do things differently in the classroom. We have the opportunity to learn new ways to self-resource, to feel internally strong and present in the classroom. Now, my boys used to tease me and say, oh yeah, all right, miss, peace and love, yeah, whatever. But hey, they were listening to me. They would sit down. They would give me a chance. It took a lot of emotional strength to build up that relationship and trust. In the words of Jon Kabat-Zinn, the mindfulness guru, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Now, we cannot change the demographic of children that we teach. We cannot change whether the government moves the goalposts again and the legislation changes. We cannot change what's happening at home and if our children are also struggling or if the roof has just fallen down. The only thing we can take charge of is ourselves. The only thing we can take charge of is our internal resources, our internal landscape. And I believe it's our responsibility to use that internal landscape to provide the most healthy and wholesome teaching environment that a child can receive. So, if you want to make a difference as a teacher, if you want to remain a teacher, stay the long haul, then please take time for yourself. Take time to be still. Take time to recharge, even if you still have marking to do. Unless you do that, you are not serving your students, your colleagues, your school, or yourself. Thank you very much.